Hi, and welcome to a special edition of That Millwall Podcast. This time, we're not necessarily going to be talking solely about Millwall. In fact, we're not going to be talking about Millwall at all. What we're going to be doing is talking about football, the Football Spectators Act of 1989, which is a set of regulations that in some people's eyes penalise football fans unlike any other spectator sport in the UK. My name's Micky Simpson, and I'm joined today by Robert Perkins, who's part of Football Law Associates. And well, I'll let you tell me who you are, because obviously you're a lawyer who specialises in football regulations and football law. So I'll let you tell the audience briefly what you're doing, and we can hopefully educate people over the next however long, and hopefully protect people from making silly mistakes that we both hear of every day from people who wish they didn't do things the way they did it and done it differently.
Exactly, yeah. Well, I'm a criminal defence lawyer, I suppose you could call me, or solicitor. I specialise, as you said, in football offences and football banning orders, which quite often flow from football convictions or convictions for football offences. So yeah, you could call me, a short version of it is a football lawyer, if you like. But yeah, so I'm often in court at the police station, helping fans who are either under investigation for an offence that's been committed either at a football match or in a football context, or at court because they've then been prosecuted and they're facing the prospect of a conviction and possibly a minimum of a 3-year football ban. So that's kind of what I do day to day. It's really it's a day to day kind of eye-opening business that we're in, because we're facing situations with fans that are extremely stressful and worrying. The majority of people that we help have never been in trouble before. Have been going to football for their whole lives, and law-abiding citizens, probably got good jobs, families, and something happens at football, either that they've not intended because they've got carried away in a moment, because of it's an emotional game, and so things happen that you wouldn't necessarily expect that you would do, or because you're in a situation with other football fans and the situation develops out of your control. Quite often at away games, for example, if you're in like a police cordon and you're told to go a certain way and you follow the instructions of the police, and then something happens that you're not expecting, and suddenly you're caught up in it and you're part of what the police take to be a group of fans that are a problem, and you can very easily find yourself in a situation where you're charged with an offence or being asked to go into a police interview. And it's a dangerous landscape, and you've got to be careful.
No, that's it.
We can kind of get a bit of the message out there that you really need to make sure that if you are in that environment, that you get some assistance, legal assistance.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. I fully agree with you, because I think what we'll probably end up using some terminology throughout this, that if you ever hear the word risk supporter associated with your name, that means that you are either associating with known hooligans, or the police believe you to be a known hooligan. And hence that could be why you're being followed to the station, or followed from the station to the pubs, and you have police walk around the pubs, etc., etc., etc. So
it's a regularly used term by the football police, and it's quite an arbitrary sort of term. It's far-reaching. It has serious kind of connotations when it's presented to a judge, for example, that this person is a risk supporter or associated risk, and it can. I mean, I've had a situation where a client has said to me, they're calling me a risk supporter because they're saying I associate with risk supporters, but I go down to the local pub and there's only one pub in town, and that's where everyone drinks before the game. And there's women and children there. So does that mean that they're risk supporters as well, because they're in the same pub with someone that the police consider to be a risk fan, a risk supporter? So it's a crazy kind of, a lot of the time it's a crazy term that doesn't really make much sense, and there's not really much justification for it. But it's a tool which is used to help the police present a certain picture of a person with an aim of getting a football banning order.
No, I totally agree. So basically, the Football Spectators Act 1989 came in after Hillsborough because obviously the police and the governments and everyone at the time wanted to bring something in to give them more control and more powers going forward. So the Football Spectators Act covers a football membership scheme, what was never implemented, but we can come back to that at the end. A National Football Intelligence Unit, restriction orders, which are potentially FBOs or football banning orders, control of alcohol, and obviously new bits have been added, which is the international matches, which has been updated again recently to include women's football.
That's right.
So
also added offences on the you've got a schedule which has got all the different offences in there. So they've also added possession of cocaine whilst entering or attempting to enter, and also some online offences. But I mean that's all after the Euros. 2020? Oh, what was the Euros where we had
2020?
2020 was it?
Yeah, it was 2020. Yeah, because Euros last year. Yeah, 2020.
Yeah. And then because it was delayed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But it was
2022, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think no. It came in the new law came in 2022, but I think it was. Anyway, it was the one that we all remember where it was all just after lockdown.
2021.
I think it was 20.
Yeah.
It was Italy, wasn't it? And we were at Wembley. And there's a Netflix documentary about it, which you've probably seen. A lot of people might have seen it. And it
which is comical, to be fair.
It's comical, and it presents a picture which look, we were all, having been locked down for such a long time and followed these very restrictive rules. It was clearly one of those situations where it was something big was happening in London, a big event, and everyone just went down there and let off a bit of steam. But the picture that it portrays of kind of cocaine-fueled violence and disorder, and people going in without tickets, that essentially then caused the government to carry out this review. It's by somebody called Baroness Casey, and she conducted this review and said that football violence and disorder is increasing, and it is largely driven by cocaine use, etc. But actually, what caused the change in the law? So I'm getting really geeky now. Is that after the actual final, where Marcus Rashford missed the penalty, there was a lot of online racist abuse, and the next day in the House of Commons, Boris Johnson stood there and said, "Well done to our boys. It was awful, the racist abuse that was levelled at Marcus Rashford. I vow to change the law on football offences and football banning orders, because someone like that should never be allowed to, or shouldn't be allowed to go to football, should be given a football banning order." Because, of course, at that point, racist abuse online wasn't an offence you could get a football banning order for, because you had to pose a risk of violence or disorder at football. And someone like that, because it might be someone who's never been to a football match in their life and is sitting at home and just wants to be, wants a bit of attention. And so, in fact, it's as a result of that they then changed the law so that someone like that can get a football banning order, because it then became that it doesn't have to be a risk of violence or disorder. The court must impose one unless it would be unjust. So that person now would get a football banning order. But all those people before who didn't necessarily pose a risk of violence or disorder would then get a ban as well.
I mean, the thing that gets me...
They added the power to include any other offences to the schedule, which they then added cocaine to. So that's the kind of background to it.
Yeah. And the cocaine if, and obviously we're not condoning anything, any of these laws
No.
in here, or the use of over excessive alcohol or cocaine or anything else. We're not condoning. We're just letting you understand what the laws are. And if you were going about your day-to-day business without football involved, potentially anything under 0.5 grams or 0.5 grams, you would probably receive a caution. Within football, if it's a football event you're going to or coming from, or even on the same day, the criminal conviction tolerance is 0.1 gram, isn't it?
It is pretty much exactly. It's if it's barely traceable amount, then there's a chance. We've even had cases where it's trace amounts and it's still prosecuted, and we've been able to then get the case either thrown out or not guilty after trial. But the person then has to go through that whole experience of having a trial. But you're right. I mean, having possession of cocaine in any other aspect, whether it's a music concert, whether it's at a bar on a Friday or Saturday night, if you're found in possession of it, odds are you're probably going to be given a fixed penalty notice if you've not done it before, and be gone away, and that'll be the end of it. But as you say, if it's in circumstances either actually at the football ground, attempting to enter, which can be, if you've got a match ticket and you're halfway down the road, that can still be to enter technically, or at least that's you can find yourself being prosecuted for that. Although again, I had a case recently where the person was quite far down the road, and we were able to argue that wasn't actually entering. Or attempting to enter, but I mean we've had cases where people have been. It's been like 4 hours before the game, and the person was 2 miles away, and they're trying to say that the person was entering or attempting to enter, and it's just that's you couldn't be further away from it really. It's not in any football context.
No.
But if you are in that situation, you can find yourself. You won't be arrested necessarily. But they'll take the details down.
Yeah, but that's the sneaky bit. What you said there, you might not be arrested. No, but the problem is, and it's something else what we cover now, is what people need to understand is that definitely within London, and I think it's definitely UK wide potentially, but every football club has an information sharing agreement with police forces.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if I went to football and I was caught with a trace amount and the police officer thought, we're not really going to get a conviction here, but what we will do is we're going to confiscate it, we're going to take his details, and because they can't actually then get a prosecution to be able to give me a football banning order, what they will do is share my information with the football club. And then what will happen is that every football club in the country has a zero tolerance towards drugs. They will then ban me automatically for a period of time, which I will have zero options of being able to overturn that ban purely because of what it is. Because football clubs are a private business, they can pretty much ban you for anything they want.
They can. I mean, we work closely with the FSA, and there is a route. They help fans with club bans. They're very good at that. So if you're given a ban, whether it's for cocaine or for anything else, which you feel is excessive, and sometimes the clubs will slap an indefinite ban on you or a life, and sometimes for not really what feels like not much very serious, and so the FSA can help you with that. So we quite often will divert fans, and sometimes actually bizarrely it can be if we've gone through an application where from the prosecution and the police for a football banning order, and we've been successful, and the ban's not been imposed by the court, the club ban can still either be implemented after that, or it can still stand if it's already been put in, and you've then got to then try and get the club ban lifted. But of course, club bans are different for football banning orders, and club bans will stop you from going to your team's home games.
Only the home game.
Only the home games, because it's a private business. So it's similar to, let's say, for example, you stole from Tesco's. Tesco's could say to you, right, you're banned from coming to Tesco's, and You can't enter. It's a private business. But they can't say, but you're also banned from going to Sainsbury's. They don't have any power or control over Sainsbury's. But what they can do is share your details with Sainsbury's and say, you might want to keep an eye out for these guys because they're known shoplifters, and therefore, so it's kind of similar to that.
It is similar.
Say away games as well.
Yes, they do. The clubs will always turn around and say you're banned from thingies. So the way that, and again, it falls into the membership. So basically, Millwall was always informed clubs that Millwall operates a membership and season ticket policy for away tickets.
Yes.
And what will happen then is that you will be banned from home games and you will be banned from purchasing away day tickets. Exactly. But if you get an away day ticket, they have no powers to stop you going to a game. But obviously, if, and I'm saying if big because I can't prove it either way, so I'm going to go if.
Yeah.
If the security officer or the match official at your club, and that could be any club, Leeds, Man United, Liverpool, whoever, Tranmere Rovers, whoever, if your club provides photographic proof of who you are to the police, and potentially if you're going to an away game, you could potentially get stopped. Exactly. And the police then will issue you with a dispersal notice to stop you going to the ground, which we'll come on to dispersals and everything else. So
there is that. Exactly right. It's a risk that you take if you're on a club ban and you go to an away game. It's a risk that you take that you could get as far as, especially if you've travelled a long distance, you spend the money on a ticket and you travel up there. And then you face the risk of being spotted by a police officer and saying, "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here," and given a dispersal notice. I mean, sometimes they don't give a dispersal; they just come up to you and make you feel very uncomfortable, which I don't think is right. But they could then obviously go and speak to the stewards at the club or security at the club and say, "Look, this person's on a club ban," and then if the club then decide to refuse you entry to that stadium, then obviously they can do that,
and then they can make you go away, escort you back to the station, put you on a train, whatever which we're coming to. So I'm going to go through a couple of scenarios, and then we'll talk about where you come in, what you can do to help. So the first scenario I'm going to do is actually, I've been arrested. I've been put in the back of the van and I've been taken to the police station, and then obviously so if you are arrested at a football match, and you are detained, handcuffed, put into a van and taken back to a holding cell. Don't speak to any officer. Don't tell them anything what you've been doing. Don't, be polite. Answer the questions what you need to question or you need to answer. Don't do any of this, Magna Carta, or I don't need to speak or whatever. You just tell them the basics, and then you make sure that they phone either yourself, and the numbers above here for Football Law Associates and Robert and Mel. You would then phone you, and then you would come in and be with police interview. Because obviously, if you are under the influence of drink or drugs, you won't be questioned for probably 12 hours or so anyway.
Yeah, they'll assess when they feel that you're fit to be interviewed, depending on how much you've had to drink and stuff. But that's exactly right. I mean, if you're unlucky enough to be arrested at a football match or in circumstances around football, from the point where you are arrested, the police will read out to you or give you what's called the police caution. And it's where a lot of people heard it before. It's where they say you don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you fail to mention now, blah, 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 blah. And what they're doing is they're giving you a warning, which is that anything that you say after this point is potentially can be used as evidence in a case if you were to be prosecuted. So at that point, anything that you say, and it can either be recorded by the police, either in a statement or their notebook, or often they're wearing their body cams. So it is quite often recorded on body cam. So that's important. You're right. Not to say something, blurt something out. The police, if you start trying to tell them about it, more often than not will stop you and just say, look, just so you know, this isn't an interview. This isn't, anything you say is being recorded. So quite often they will say that and give you that extra warning. But sometimes that can be too late. But then obviously you then be put in the van. You may be cuffed, you may not be cuffed, depending on whether they feel that you're violent or not. And then when you're at the police station, the first thing is you'll go through into the custody desk, and you'll have a custody officer there. He'll take all your details down, and he'll ask you, first of all, as you say, he'll carry out like an assessment of whether they feel that, it's a welfare check effectively. Is there any issue that they need to know about mental health and things like that? But they will then ask you if you want a solicitor, because it's every person's legal right to free and independent legal advice at the police station. And so you can say either no, or you can say yes. I would always encourage, no matter what your situation is, what sort of person you are, always you should say yes. Even if you think you've done nothing wrong, even if you think that it's going to make you look guilty, even if you think that it's going to, or you might be told it's going to mean that you're at the police station longer than you would want to be. Nobody wants to be there any longer than they have to be. But I can tell you now that asking for a solicitor, and as you say, whether it's me or you can, they say to you that if you've got a solicitor that you want us to contact, for every police station there'll be a duty solicitor. So you can say yes, the duty solicitor, or you can say Rob, or actually what's easier is you just have to say football law, and we're the only firm out there on the police database that has football in it, so they'll find us straight away, and we can get a specialist football police representative for us to any police station in the country, usually within about 45 minutes to an hour. Now, quite often we have people who say, I said I didn't want a sister because I was told I'd be waiting hours and hours for one to come, so I didn't get one. And then I was put in a cell for 5 hours, and I thought to myself, well, I might as well have got one at this point, because then I went into the interview on my own, and they were putting all sorts of questions to me that I felt very much out of my depth, and I just wanted to tell them the truth. And I've now admitted the offence, and suddenly I'm being prosecuted. So it can unravel very, very quickly. And so the very starting point is, I would say, to be sensible and to ask for a solicitor. It's free, as I say, free of charge. And the police won't think anything less of you. It won't go against you later on down the line. And sometimes it can be the difference between whether you're going to be prosecuted or not. Because, if you say something in there in answer to a question, and sometimes questions can be put in a very suggestive way, so that you agree to something that's put to you, and then suddenly, you're in a situation. And as I say, it may well be that the advice of the solicitor who attends with you is to tell the police what you've told them, because you've got a defence. But the main thing is they will at least listen to what you've got to say. They'll tell you what the police are going to be asking you, because the police have to disclose to you what they're going to be asking you to the solicitor, and then they can tell you that this is what I think you should do, and you can follow their advice or not. But it's important that you get, as I say, it doesn't matter who you are. Like I said to you before, it's the large majority of people that we represent are people that have never been in this situation before, never expected to be in this situation before, and never thought that they would need the details of a solicitor in their phone to contact or to ask for, because they don't consider themselves to be a criminal. But actually, things can develop very, very quickly, and then you're in that situation, and you've got to do the best to protect yourself.
Yeah. No, that's it. And I mean, obviously, it's always easier to say yes to a solicitor than change your mind later on, but it's a lot harder to say no first and then say yes.
Exactly.
Because they will make it as hard as possible. So the next scenario, which is probably a lot more, I was at football and it all went off around me. I was getting shoved by someone and I shoved back, or something was thrown at me and I threw it back. My pictures now appeared in the local paper asking me to try and identify me and asking me to come forward.
Yeah.
What do I do in that scenario?
It's a common thing that happens, particularly if it's something like a large-scale disorder. Quite often they do it. The police will do that press release, for example, in like a violent disorder offence. Violent disorder is where you've got 3 or more people that are involved in usually large-scale disorder. Quite often there'll be violence used, weapons. Quite often weapons bottles thrown, that kind of stuff. It's a stereotypical situation where you've got on a busy public street and traffic stopped because people are fighting in the street and things like that. That's a violent disorder. So you'll find quite often as a result of that, if they want to identify people because they've got CCTV, local authority CCTV, or from a pub, local pub or something, they will get those mugshots and they'll put them. Usually it's online, but it can be in newspapers as well. And sometimes it can be that they're just looking to identify people that will be able to help them with their investigation, and for example give them information about other people that they might want to speak about or locate, but it can cause huge reputational damage because someone that you might not want to see it, for example your boss, might see it and suddenly, or people that know you or friends and family, and suddenly you're being tarnished as a football hooligan who's been involved in that thing that happened. But generally speaking, what I would advise you do is obviously get in touch with either us or a solicitor, and you've got really two routes. The first one is do nothing. Right, if you go down the do nothing route, there is a chance that they may never be able to identify you, and if they never identify you, that might be the end of it. But it's risky, because if someone does identify you because they call them up or a police officer recognises it and identifies you, you run the risk of course, having what everybody dreads in that situation, which is what we call a 5 o'clock knock. A lot of people, most of us have seen it on social media. They like to put it out there to scare the wits out of everyone. But it will be where you see police knocking on the door of some unlucky person, and their door will be either answered and they're there, in their undies, or their door could be put through if they refuse. And they're then carted off to the police station, and nobody wants that. That's a very frightening experience. So that's the risk if you don't identify yourself. If you feel that having that mugshot up is causing you continued kind of reputational damage and you want it down, then what you can do, and most I would say cases like this, police forces will agree to doing this, is if you through us or through yourself say to them, I bear a resemblance to the person that you've put in this mugshot release, can you remove it please, and I'll come in for a voluntary interview. And that's basically where you say you agree with the police to go in on an agreed date and time. Again, you can arrange to be represented, so you get in touch with us, or you go in with that.
Always be represented.
Always be represented. So as I say, and it's this one's easier because you can call us up and say, look, I've been asked to come along to this police interview. Can you come with us? And obviously we then arrange the convenient time for them and the police, and we'll be there as well. And quite often we'll get the disclosure beforehand, so that the amount of time that you're spending at the police station is minimal, because we'll get that. We can speak to you over the phone, and we can take your instructions and advise you about what we think you should do in the police interview. So by the time you go along there, you go straight in, and you're pretty much going straight into the interview, and you're in and out very quickly. But yeah, that's kind of the way that is the alternative route, if you like, which would be, you're not necessarily identifying yourself, but you're saying I bear a resemblance, or there's an image on there that and they will quite often take it down if you are seen to cooperate. If you're identified from that mugshot and they don't come to your house to arrest you, and they've been able to identify you, they might ask you to come in for a voluntary interview because they've been able to contact you in some other means.
This is the bit through the club, because a lot of the times they will ask the club, club staff, club security to be able to identify you or anything else. So you've been identified.
Particularly if it's something that's happened and they can trace it back to your seat, for example, and you're a season ticket holder. So I've got a case at the minute where we've got there's lots of things going on, and there's lots of kind of pushing and shoving, and you can the way the person was identified was because they then went back to their seat, and so you just rewind that and you take them back, and it's like that's the person. So they then the police were able to contact the person through the information by the club. And then they got in touch with us, and then obviously a voluntary interview was arranged.
I would suggest that if you are asked to come into a voluntary interview, it's pretty much just the same as a normal interview, apart from they will try and convince you that it's not the same. It's not going to be recorded. It's just a chat, when actually it's exactly the same as a normal police interview. It's just that doing it by voluntary, they don't need to arrest you and issue you with a caution before you have an interview, isn't it?
Not quite, nearly though. So with a voluntary interview, you're attending strictly as a volunteer. Okay, so you're assisting the police with their investigation. So technically you can leave at any point. However, if you do in the middle of the interview say, I'm out, that's enough, I'm out of here, it then can be necessary for them to arrest you. So that's the first thing, is you can leave at any point, but no one ever does, because it would result in you being arrested. But also, when you attend as a voluntary interview, they don't have the power at that stage to take any of your biometrics. Your biometrics,
DNA,
photograph, DNA, fingerprints, all that kind of stuff. So you literally go into a side room, so you don't actually go through the custody area. So you unless, of course, sometimes, and this is a bit of a caveat, is they say, we'd like you to come in for a voluntary interview, but when you arrive, we are going to arrest you. Now, sometimes they do that, but they should warn you of that. They do that sometimes because they do want to actually take your biometrics for some reason, or they might want to, if they think you might take your mobile phone with you, that they can then take your phone and look at any social media messages and things like that, if it may be evident. But 9 times out of 10, I would say, if you're attending a voluntary interview, you're not likely to be arrested when you arrive. Biometrics won't be taken. They will need to tell you that it's going to be recorded, and it will be recorded, same way as if you're arrested. They will also caution you, so it'll be the same again as if you're arrested. So they will read out that police caution. So as you say, it's very similar to when you're arrested. It's just the main difference is that you're not going to end up being put in a cell and going through the whole custody process, and biometrics being taken. But they do need to caution you, and so it is when they say to you, "Oh, yeah." You know, it's you don't need to worry. We just want to get your side of it. We just want to get your version. You know, the whole kind of come in for a cup of tea and a chat kind of situation, to put you at your ease. People who have done that and gone along without a solicitor find very quickly that it's a very formal setting, and the police are pressing record on a recording machine, and they're being asked very direct questions, and they feel very much out of their depth. And it is a formal interview still, and it is something which will be used as evidence and can be used as evidence against you in the same way as if you'd been arrested. So it isn't just a chat. It isn't
what they like you to believe it is.
Well, exactly, and that's the thing. It's very much a case of some officers will not all. There's lots of very, very, very good police officers out there, but some will give you the impression that if you come along, we just want to get your version. You've got nothing to worry about. You don't need a solicitor. Don't worry about it. You don't need to worry anything. You're just going to be telling your version of it. But actually, then when you get there, it suddenly everything changes, and it can be very formal.
No, that's it. So, a couple of other points I want to kick on is obviously, and we'll come up to the banning orders and all that in a minute. But there seems to be a massive trend at the moment, especially within a certain age group across social media, that things what happen at football has to be recorded, has to be put on social media.
Yeah.
And there's various accounts what have been set up purely to retweet, repost, and gain exposure by these accounts. The police are all over these accounts. In fact, some would say that the police allegedly operate some of these accounts so that they can gather information what basically does their job for them. So my advice to people would be, if you record something at football, keep it on your own phone. For now, but don't share it publicly. And I probably wouldn't keep it on my own phone for ages if you mix within that circle, because if they confiscate your phone, even if it is locked, they still have ways of being able to get information off your phone.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you, a lot of people think, well, if they haven't got my phone, that they can't access things like messages, but actually, as you say, if your account, social media accounts are put on public, or you're posting on public, for forums or chat groups, it is a tool which the police certainly utilise. They are watching the accounts that they feel could be ones which have that sort of material posted on them that could be used and potentially actually used as evidence. We've had lots of cases where clips have been found online through various different platforms and then becomes evidence. There are things that we can do later on down the line potentially to make applications to get that evidence dismissed, but at that point it's almost too late, and a judge can refuse that if we try and get it thrown out. There does need to be a chain of evidence, if you like, which shows the origin of it, because obviously video material can be edited and changed and adapted, so it doesn't necessarily show truly what actually happened. And so there's quite often the ability for us to be able to do that later on down the line, but you don't want to get to that stage. You've got to be sensible. Common sense is certainly something which I think, if you know that you've captured something or you've been involved in something that you feel might be a problem, don't start splashing it all over social media, because, as you say, the police will be all over it.
Look, if that's your thing and you want to do it, then you know what, do it. But what I would suggest is, if you are going to do it, just spend a couple of minutes. If the likes and the retweets and everything else are so desperate for you, just blur out everybody's faces.
Exactly, yeah.
Because what you're doing by posting the information online is you're pretty much dropping people right in it. Yeah. Because the police might have no evidence of the disorder apart from 4 people in that crowd who took footage from different angles, some longer than the others. And what you've done, and I've known people where this has happened, what you've pretty much done is given them, it's a 30-second clip of a fight, but between 4 people, they've probably recorded it for 5-6 minutes. Yeah. You've then got the crowd goading the other ones, so you've got clear images of everybody, then it all goes off. You've then pretty much given the police all the evidence they need to prove that it was possibly premeditated violence, etc., and potentially you've got someone a 3 or 5 year banning order, or potentially prison, purely because you wanted half a dozen likes on social media.
Yeah, I think in a lot of these things that the police might not actually be present and witness it themselves, and so it's different than if you've got a situation which has occurred in front of a load of police officers. Then they can make statements and they can identify people, and then they can build their case that way. And then they might also rely on things like CCTV and social media clips. But there's so many things that do, as you said, that occur that aren't in the presence of police, might not have been captured by CCTV from a nearby pub or local authority, or even the club cameras. But as you say, a few people or one person has filmed it on their phone and then posted it. That can then be the evidence that they need to bring a prosecution, for sure.
I think we've covered there. The simple rules are, if you're arrested at football, always ask for a solicitor.
Yeah,
regardless. What's that?
Or a voluntary interview.
Yeah, or a voluntary interview. Yeah. Always take legal advice. Speak to a lawyer first. Take if you're in a police station, always get a solicitor. You can always change solicitors afterwards, but always have. Yeah, and it's free. That's the biggest thing. Is that a lot of people, the police will tell you, they won't necessarily tell you on record, but they might suggest that it's going to take you hours, or potentially it's going to cost you loads of money. And look, this is a nothing offence. Yeah. The quicker we get this done, you can be home.
Exactly.
So,
you think, oh, great, I need to get home.
Yeah, oh mate, my missus is going to kill me or whatever. I've never been arrested. I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
The other part of that is the other trick they use is, look, just take a caution and we can finish it here and now. You don't need to get a lawyer involved. You just take a caution. It's not a criminal offence. It's not a criminal standing, but take a caution and we can move forward.
Yeah.
Cautions aren't what you're led to believe they are within the world of football, shall we say.
No.
Cautions can still get you banned.
They can certainly, like you said, get a club ban, almost certainly. I'll find out about it. There's two types of football banning orders. I don't want to get too kind of bogged down in the details of football banning orders, but you've got the two types are, and I'm talking about football banning orders that are imposed by a court, because they are much more far-reaching and restrictive than a club ban. They ban you from every football match, every regulated football match, which is Conference League and above.
Yeah, male and female.
Yes, exactly, and it's for 3 years minimum. During that time, you have to, whenever required to do so, you've got to surrender your passport. So that means you can't travel abroad. And so if your team's playing in Europe, or if there's an England, either match or Euros or World Cup, you're going to have to surrender your passport whenever, and it's normally about a week or 2 weeks before the competition. You won't get it back till the end, even if England crash out midway through the tournament. So it means that, particularly if you've got people who have got, a job that means you have to travel abroad at short notice, and you surrendered your passport, that can be really problematic. So football banning rules imposed by the court are much more restrictive than a club imposed ban. And if you breach that order by doing any of those things you're not allowed to do, you will be prosecuted for a separate offence. And, if it's a serious enough breach, you can go to prison for it. So it's very, very serious. The most common type of football banning order that I deal with is following a conviction. Yeah. So you've gone to the police station, you've been charged with an offence, a football offence, you've then been prosecuted, you go to court, and you either plead guilty or you're found guilty after a trial. That conviction triggers the ability of the prosecution and the court to apply for a football banning order. That's following conviction. But when you said you can get a football banning order following a caution, you could, if that caution forms part of a pattern of behaviour which the police consider to be a problem, because there's another type of football banning order which is not following conviction; it's on complaint by the police.
Yes, so the civil one.
The commissioner of the police feels that you are a problem at football. And what's actually quite important to know about this is that this type of football banning order can include any examples of violence or disorder anywhere in the world.
Yes.
So there's no time restriction, and it can happen anywhere in the world, even though it's outside of their jurisdiction. For example, and I've dealt with this type of application where the police say, he was seen to be part of a group that was playing in, over in Germany or wherever, and involved in violence and disorder there, although it didn't result in any kind of prosecution. And that's one example. Another example, that he was seen associated with some risk supporters at a pub. And then another example is that he was present on this day where there was disorder around the time. And they use these quite often broad terms. And speak to person, they say, I was at that game, but I wasn't involved in that. Or like I said before, I'm at that pub, but that's a pub that everyone goes to.
And they use it through the civil. They use it as a civil banning order rather than a criminal banning order. And because it's civil, the levels of guilt they're lower than what they are for criminals. So, for instance, they used the civil side of the banning orders for the Euros in France a few years back, because it was an option for them, because none of them were really, unless it was really serious, none of them got prosecuted because there was too much going on in France. Yeah. But what they did do is all the newspapers with the video footage, all the people videoing it, sharing it online, everything else, They went through all of that, found
Yeah.
people who they already knew were technically risk, and just looked through it, created 5, 6, 7 clips from one length of video potentially, but they would submit that to the judge and go, this is evidence to prove that this is a known football hooligan who poses a threat to the UK at football games. We don't want him to attend. And the judge was quite happily going 5 years, 5 years, 5 years.
Yeah, I think the thing is that, like you said, the test is much lower than it is after conviction. In conviction, post conviction, the prosecution, the legal test, although it is still a civil order, it's that higher test. It's balance. It's reasonable doubt. When you're facing a complaint by police application, it's the civil standard, which, again, not wanting to be too legalistic about it, it's what we call balance of probability. So it's more likely than not. So all the prosecution or the police have to do through their advocate is persuade a judge that it's more likely than not that these things that they're talking about happened.
You're going to hate my analogy here because you're a lawyer and you're going to hate it, but it's pretty much as in criminal court, you're innocent till proven guilty.
Yeah.
Civil, you're guilty until proven innocent. In
Not
theory,
quite as far as that, but it's
it's very similar. As in, it's probably a good.
It's certainly closer to that. It's certainly closer. So, but and it can be really difficult because you got quite often now that the police will say, right, here's 20 examples of things that we say that you've been involved in, and you could go through them and you could knock probably half of those out. I've had people say, I wasn't even in the country when that happened and I can prove it. But you've got to go through each one of those in court and say to the judge, yeah, that one's not right because of that. And then that one's not right. And you can see as you're doing it, each one in turn, the judge is almost turning off and saying, so it's almost like the more mud they throw, the more that will stick.
And they will throw mud. They will throw loads of it. Video clips from them. And they will use, if they've got those clips, if they're going after you for football, they will use, if you attend other protests, other marches, etc., etc.
That when I said it's examples of violence or disorder anywhere in the world at any time, it doesn't actually even have to be football related. So I had one which was a couple of years ago, and they included situations where the guy had been in a very volatile relationship with his ex-partner, and there were allegations and counter allegations by both of them over a period of about a year or so. And so the police used that. So they said, he's got allegations of domestic violence against him. And he was saying, well, yeah, but this was during the time when and what's that got to do with football? And so, but it was still in there. But
it wouldn't have been in the criminal case.
It couldn't have been in the criminal case.
No.
It would, well, certainly not to the extent where, in terms of the criminal football banning order, technically, if you are charged with an assault or some violent offence and the prosecution apply for a bad character application because you've got a previous violence, that can go in then. But if we're talking about football banning orders, they're not going to realistically use. The judge wouldn't pay much attention to a conviction or an allegation a long time ago that was on the.
No, that's it. We're hit on it. I'm going to use the word allegedly because neither one of me or you, I don't think, have the evidence to prove it one way or another. But there has been a myth. So I'm going to use the word allegedly, that the football policing unit receives monetary reward for every football banning order they get from the Home Office, ranging from between £2,500 and £4,500, roughly, possibly. I am looking to try and get someone who can prove this categorically to come on, but it is a myth. It is something that's out there, hence why police will actively look to get football banning orders. And also, I think over the next 12 months, we will see football banning applications go through the roof.
Yeah.
Purely because Not because the police want extra money for the football unit, which they will because they're funded differently, but I've got a feeling there must be a football special occasion coming up. Oh, 2026, it's the World Cup in America.
Oh yeah, well remembered. Yeah, I mean, you're right. As I understand it, that the football policing unit has a separate budget, which is ring fenced and is determined year on year by the amount of football banning orders that they get through the courts. And yeah, I mean, we saw it in lead up to the Euros, the most recent Euros, and in every competition, that there is almost a bit of what feels like a bit of not a panic necessarily, but they are trying to get cases through the courts in the weeks and months before the competition starts.
Yeah.
That ordinarily might have taken months and months to go through that process between the police station and the court. Really with the goal of getting them before the court and, if possible, football banning orders dished out to them, so that by the time the competition actually starts, they're on bans and they're not going to be able to go out there. And you know, look, you can understand that, because if there are people that they genuinely consider to be a risk, they're not going to want them going out to Germany or to the US and getting in trouble.
Yeah.
But you know, sometimes it's a very one-sided way of looking at it. You know, you probably remember with Russia. You know, a lot of the things went on there were not the English football fans' fault. It was there was an awful lot of violence that they had nothing. You know, they were attacked. It was an ambush.
Yeah.
It's I think the way that happens before a big competition like that does often feel quite.
I would also suggest, and again, I've got no evidence to prove this one way or another, but I would probably suggest, especially towards the later part of this year, probably the start of the new football season in August, that potentially we will end up seeing more drug dogs employed at stadiums, more random stop and search, more visits to pubs, because obviously they will use the licensing powers within the pubs, that cocaine's not allowed to take part on the premises, and force it under the publicans to make sure that they're acting, reporting, because obviously they're threatening their licensing. And so I think there'll probably be a multitude because if you get a drug conviction, you're not going to America. And it might be easier for them to get you on a drug conviction than potentially a violent conviction, because they might not have any evidence that you are a violent football fan or a risk supporter, but they know that you do this, and that could be an easier option for them to stop you going to America.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what's interesting is when they stop people that have been found to be in possession of cocaine, they don't actually drug test them, so they don't carry out.
Do they not?
No. So they in all the cases that I've had, I haven't seen a single one where they've done the edit test where they said you take this and you've clearly taken it. Which you would think, if they're trying to draw an analogy between people that, for example, have been involved in violence, that a drug test would follow.
But if I was arrested normally, for an offence, for robbery, burglary, violence, where outside away from football, I would be screened. I would be screened for drugs, wouldn't I?
Yeah,
they need that for their criteria to show
exactly
who's on drugs, etc., etc. But at football, they don't screen you.
Not for being in possession of.
Yeah,
you would think that they would, and actually, in a lot of cases, it would be probably quite helpful if they did. Certainly, in a lot of the cases that I've had, where people have said, "I literally hadn't taken any. I'd forgotten that I bought it, 2 weeks ago for a club or a party that I went to. It was in my jacket pocket, and I hadn't worn my jacket for a couple of weeks. And I go along to the football, and and literally completely forgotten about it. And at the moment where the drug dog stops me or sits down and I'm taken to one side, I suddenly have that, light bulb moment of, oh my God, I've got it in my pocket. So that would be quite useful actually, to have a drug test at that point to say, look, he hadn't taken any and he didn't intend to take any in a football context. Yeah. But yeah, it is the drug thing. It is going to be something which I think will. It's certainly. I mean, well, obviously, it wasn't an offence where they could get a football banning order before 2022.
No.
And so before 2022, if you were stopped in possession of cocaine, you would have been given a fixed penalty notice or a caution.
Yeah.
A case, if I had a case that was prosecuted in court before 2022 for possession of cocaine, more often than not, I'd be able to get it referred back to the police for a caution to be given.
Yeah.
As soon as you hit 2022, or really a few months after that, because it took a while for the police and actually the prosecution to catch on, because a lot of time I was going to court and I was thinking, right, it's now an offence where you can get a football banning order. They're going to be going for a football banning order. And the prosecutor was actually unaware. So I was able to still get it referred back, or they weren't applying for football banning order. I certainly wasn't going to remind them.
No, of course not.
After a while, they after about a month or so, they're cottoned on. And now in almost every single case, if you're found in possession of cocaine, you're going to be charged and prosecuted, and you're going to end up in court. And, if there's no issue about possession or knowledge, then, you don't have much choice other than to plead guilty. You've then got a conviction. As you say, that makes it almost impossible to get a visa to travel to America. So regardless of whether you're in a football banning order or not, that can be problematic travelling to countries like.
I would also suggest that some of the football policing units are a bit spiteful, and if you did get a possession for drugs, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't put a marker on your vehicle registration, and depending on what job you do, whether or not they give a nice little, and they will use the information sharing policy and a duty of care to other people that they potentially, I'm not saying they do, but there is a possibility that, if you're a van driver or a truck driver, and because it's special driving conditions, there is a possibility that they might inform DVLA or your boss that you were arrested for possession of a substance and going. I'm not saying that happens every time. I'm just saying, look, you've got to be aware that these people who you see at football, and you take your selfies with them, and you have your chats with them, and all of that, they are not your friend, and they will shaft you at the first opportunity they can, if it means that they're getting a conviction out of you. I'm not saying, I'm not saying go out and spit in the face or do this, do that. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying to you is, what you need to understand: these people are not your friend. They're there to gather information. So you sitting there talking to them, going, "Oh, hello, mate. You've just come." An example: you've just come off an away train. Okay, you're at, I don't know. Let's go. We're going Birmingham, right? They've seen you going most games at away games. They know that you drink with most of the people. You're not in any way classed as a risk associate or a risk fan. You are just a guy who goes with his son to football or his daughter, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But that little chat going, coming up was a bit of a nightmare, wasn't it? How'd it go? Blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
Where are you going drinking? Are you going drinking to the Half Moon then?
Yeah, I'll see you there.
No, I'm going here. Oh, okay, then. Is that better one then?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, we've drank there before every time we come. That information might not be known to that police officer, but you've unavoidably given them intelligence for not only that game, but going forward.
It's very much like that. And it will be, classic situation, exactly as you described. Either just coming off a train, having a chat as they're walking along, or quite often it'll be if you're sitting in the pub with your mates, and you get these officers that will come in and they'll kind of, talk about the game. How do you think it's going to go today? How do you think they're doing, this season? And you feel like, well, can't hurt to have a chat with the officer. They're being friendly enough. They're nice enough. I've not got a problem with the police, but that a lot of any information that you give to them it is evidence gathering. They are making themselves aware of all the faces, who's who's friends with who associates with who goes where, when they go there. So that it is a very much it comes across as being a very friendly, nice chat, but actually, they're not your friends, and they are working, they are doing their job, and part of that is obtaining evidence and information which can be used in the future, and is used. I've had that exact situation where someone gets charged and prosecuted, and they're in court, and they say, like, I know that officer. I see him on a weekly basis, always coming into the pub and having a chat, and I've talked to him so many times now. And here he is now giving a statement saying, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this and that, and it's very two-faced. But I have to say to him, but he was always doing his job. It wasn't a case that he's doing his job. He's obtaining evidence all that time. It doesn't feel right. And actually, what then happens is if you then have that situation and word gets round that that's what the officer's doing, you then find that people will refuse to talk to the police when they come in and they try and have a chat. But then they can use that against you, because they can say he's very obstructive and he's anti-police, refuses to talk to police when we try and engage with him. And it's like, well, is it any wonder, after what's happened, you can't blame them for shutting up their walls, when you've gone in and you've done that previously and you've got a bit of a name for yourself.
And also, don't forget that the British Transport Police and the Football Policing Unit are two different organisations, but they do talk between each other. So if you're misbehaving on a train or you're with the wrong people, that message will already been what colour jacket, what everything else you've got, that would already be at the station.
It's already
for the spotters to spot you. So, when you think, how the hell did we get roped up? Well, it's because someone on there and they thought that, they're following you and they've seen them and they just know that they'll watch that one and they know where everyone else goes. We've been on an hour. We're slowly bringing this to a close, and then we'll probably do another, because there'll probably be loads of questions in the comments, and maybe we'll look at doing another one, or we'll look at doing some bits and pick out certain parts and
I'd love to
go through it. Obviously, police. What I want to do is go through some of the offences briefly, not the obvious ones, because obviously violent disorder, we know what that is. But some of the ones what people don't necessarily know and could get them a criminal conviction. Police within stadiums are there by invite, and obviously the clubs pay for it. The reason clubs use outside organisation for drug dogs is because it's private property and the police can't necessarily act there. I'm going to come back to one point what I was going to raise on there, which is facial recognition, which I'll come back to afterwards, because I think it's something what people need to know about on that. So vaping in a stadium technically is a criminal offence, could be. Can get you a club ban, definitely, but if the police wanted to be awkward, it could potentially, because it is covered.
I've not seen
it, but it
and it wouldn't be an offence in schedule. So again, getting legalistic with this, it's not in Schedule 1 of the Football Spectators Act, so it wouldn't result in a football banning order. Therefore, unlikely you're going to be prosecuted.
But it would get you a club ban.
Could get you a club ban, exactly.
Taking my beer back into my seat and having a drink of it with watching the football, that can get me arrested. It's
a criminal offence. I mean, it's crazy. You can have any other sport where, rugby, you can go and happily sit there with a pint. Football, and actually, weirdly enough, in the legislation, it doesn't necessarily, when it was originally drafted, it meant for sporting events. So it could have been, used to cover all sporting events, but they chose just football. But you're right. If you are in the bar, and you have your pint and you're walking through, most of the time there will be posters that will say no alcohol past this point. Not all clubs have it, most do. You'd hope also the stewards would see you and say you can't come beyond this point. But if you are in sight of the pitch and you are in possession of alcohol, you're committing a criminal offence which could result in you being prosecuted, convicted, and a 3-year football banning order. What it's not that much of a regular thing. Occasionally we do get people who have been charged with it. It's not most common.
If you're misbehaving a bit, then there's a chance that they might get you on that. If that's the loophole, what they can get you on.
They don't normally allow you to get past that point because they're aware of it. I think actually this is, quite. I don't know whether you know about this, but I think it was Milton Keynes. They built this really lovely new stadium, and the bar. Obviously, the architects had made it so the bar overlooked the pitch, so that you could have sit at the bar and have a drink whilst you're watching the game. And someone obviously pointed out to them that if someone's at the bar drinking and watching the game, they're committing a criminal offence. So everyone could technically be arrested and prosecuted.
Yeah. Hence why
they put the plastic sheeting in front of it. All this ugly plastic sheeting, and spent millions of pounds on probably this nice new bar, and they had to.
They do that at Millwall as well. When you're in the lounge, they basically stop serving alcohol for the duration of the game, or the duration of the first and second half, and pull down all the blinds because you can be done.
You literally can't see it. You can't see the pitch. The one that I think gets most people, and I think this is really unfair, because I had a judge actually ask me recently, what are you supposed to do in this situation, is pyrotechnics. So you've got.
I was going to come on to this,
Oh wait, okay. Well, if I'm getting, then let me know. But
no, we go. What I was going to cover was pyrotechnics.
Yeah.
So drinking, pyrotechnics, encroaching.
Yep.
Throwing.
Yes. Yeah.
So encroaching, there's going to be, I've got two sides to that. So encroaching where you've jumped over, and encroaching where the momentum has pushed you over.
Yeah.
And then also the throwing of onto the pitch, and also throwing something in anger in the stand towards someone else. So I was going to cover that. So if we go on to pyrotechnics now, and then we'll go from there. So
so I mean, obviously we're all kind of, I guess, used to seeing them now, either on TV. I mean, classically, you see some of these videos of the European ultras, and they're just, there's like thousands of pyrotechnics all going off, and it looks pretty amazing. And in fact, even when you go to most games, there'll be like a little pyrotechnic show that's done by the club. It does add atmosphere. There's no getting away from it. It has a wow factor. But if you are caught in possession of a flare, smoke grenade, anything like that could be deemed to be a firework, it's a criminal offence. So attempting to enter. When you're in there, if you then let one off in the stand, it's going to be obvious because you're going to get smoke. So it's probably going to be quite easy to identify you as the person who's let it off. Again, a criminal offence. It's going to end up with you being prosecuted, going to court, 3-year football banning order potentially. The thing that I had recently, which is where I mentioned that the judge had asked me what you're supposed to do, is where a smoke flare had been let off and it had been thrown up in the air during a goal celebration, and it had landed at this lad's feet, and he was only young, and he kind of looked at it, and he was like, the smoke was coming in his face, and he was trying to put it out with his foot because he didn't want to breathe it in, and it wouldn't go out. So he picked it up. Everyone else is still jumping around celebrating. He's got it in his hand, and he's looking over to where the stewards are in the stairway, and he's trying to get their attention, but they can't see him. Eventually, they do come over. He's dropped it at this point, but then they take him off, and he's arrested. And then he's prosecuted for being in possession of a flare or a smoke grenade. And he had to go through the whole process of having a trial. And he was found not guilty, luckily. But the judge said, what was he supposed to do? We've seen the CCTV. We can see him doing that. We can see him trying to put it out. We can see him holding it up. What else, other than trying to get the attention of the stewards, is he supposed to do? And I said, well, I don't know. He's been prosecuted for this now, and he could be convicted. So it is very unfair. There's not really any answer to that, other than I would just say you just got to stand there and let it continue to smoke, because if you pick it up, you're in possession.
No, that's it. And also, why are you taking pyrotechnics in? Because some of the places you're putting pyrotechnics to take in
Yeah.
are very questionable.
Well,
Prison
I had,
pocket comes to mind. Babies' nappies come to mind.
yeah.
Women,
I had
I
a
hear.
very young client who, and I bless him, I felt very sorry for him. He was, I can't remember the area, but it was quite a remote area. But he'd gone to this game, and he'd bought this flare on Amazon using his mum's Amazon account for like 10 quid or whatever.
Yeah.
And he took it along to this game, and he thought, what's the worst that's going to happen if I get caught with it? I'll probably just get told to leave the game. And he didn't have a clue that it was going to be a criminal offence. He just thought he was going to be told if he got caught that he could leave the game. And he put it down his pants, and he goes up to where the security staff are, and they say to him, "Got anything you shouldn't have?" And he said, "No. Yeah, here you go." And he kind of reaches down in his pants and kind of pulls out this flare. And that was it. They had him. And at that point, he was prosecuted. He was taken through the court again. Now he had to admit to it. He's got a conviction on his record. He's a young lad whose reputation, and he's going out into the world of trying to get a job, etc. It's difficult enough without having a conviction. And so that was, I felt very unfair. But it does happen, and he was just totally clueless about it. Most people know that you shouldn't do it, but don't think it's result in a conviction and 3-year ban.
No, that's it. So
that's that. That's pyrotechnics, and as I say, it seems quite harmless. And it's used by the clubs to. I remember that on the front page of the Times. I think this is again back in the year when the Euros. It was Harry Maguire with 2 red flares on the front page of the Times, and it is glamorized by kind of mainstream media as a bit of harmless fun, but it's not harmless fun when you're the one that's suddenly in court and facing a prosecution.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So the other point is pitch encroachment. If you step onto the pitch so the plain obvious one is this: you step on a pitch, it's a criminal offence.
Yeah.
There is a chance you will be arrested.
Yeah.
If it's a mass crowd in a pitch, there is a chance that you could be arrested. Even at end of season, if the police and the clubs wanted to be a pain in the arse, you could be arrested.
Yeah.
But what happens if I'm at the front and it's a low offence and the crowd surges and I basically fall onto the pitch, and as I've fallen onto the pitch, the stewards have grabbed me and carted me off?
Yeah. So pitch encroachment is sometimes it can be misleading because you think of the pitch as being the playing area, and that if you get on the playing area, that's the offence that you committed. But actually, it's way back from there. Yeah. If you get onto the area which is called the area adjacent to the pitch, so that's the bit over the barrier. There's a little strip of grass there that was, going to be where the players are going to be warming up and that kind of thing. And then you've got the pitch starting there. If you even get onto that bit, or in fact, if you actually get onto that barrier, that's enough for the offence.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether you've done it in goal celebration or celebration at a win. So what your motivation is doesn't matter. Whether it's for because it's a hostile reason, because you're angry at one of the players, or you've been wound up, something the ref's done, and you've just lost it and you've just gone over. Doesn't matter. Still going to be prosecuted potentially for either of those two situations. But the situation that you've described, where you've got people pushing from behind and you've got a low wall, and you think to yourself, either you think I'm going to be injured here and because of this crush, or I can't withstand the pressure from behind me. I'm just being carried along with it. It's involuntary. Yeah. So in that situation, you'd hope that the CCTV, when you hopefully get it, will show that you're not jumping over there and celebrating. If there's anything like that, then you haven't got a defence. But of course, if it looks like you're just being carried along by a surge of thousands of people behind you, and you're right at the front, you would hope most police officers would understand that and would not prosecute you. But we have had cases where people have been prosecuted for that.
Yeah.
and we've been able to put forward a successful defence that the person genuinely feared that they were going to be injured. If they tried to withstand it, they're going to get crushed between the wall and the people from behind. So they've got over to avoid injury. I had a guy that had to lift his young daughter over because he was worried that she was going to get crushed. So yeah, there is obviously that as a defence for sure. But as I say, if there's any kind of element of on the CCTV, you looking like you're doing it voluntarily, getting on there yourself, then you can expect to be prosecuted.
Yeah. Throwing an item. Obviously, if you throw an item that lands onto the pitch, in anger or in frustration, it's a nickable offence without a shadow of a doubt. What people don't necessarily understand is if a goal goes in and you throw a programme or your cup of Bovril in disgust or disappointment at that last-minute goal, whether or not it hits the pitch or it doesn't hit the pitch, you could potentially be arrested for that too.
Exactly. So you're right. So the first one is the obvious one where you've thrown an object. They call it a missile. So it has to have a forward trajectory, if that makes sense. So it has to be propelled forward or in that direction. And it can be any object. So we've represented people who have been accused or been charged with throwing chewing gum, a vape, obviously coins and things like that. They're the most common, but something as kind of as harmless as you think, a paper cup, a toilet roll, an inflatable fish, a pie crust. It's not going to cause any damage, but you've thrown it towards the pitch.
I don't know. Some of Millwall's pies are not that are quite solid, so I don't know about a pie crust. But yeah, go on.
Be thrown, but it doesn't. Also, you're right. It doesn't matter why you've done it, whether it's done in celebration or whether it's done in anger. But it also doesn't matter whether it's gone onto the pitch or even towards the pitch. If you've thrown it in an area where there are other spectators, which is obviously fans present, that's enough. So if you throw it towards away to the opposing fans, or if you throw it anywhere else in the stand where other fans are, that's enough for you to commit an offence and then also be prosecuted. So, which also seems crazy because exactly as you said, we've had people that have thrown paper cups, just up in the air, and it's going to happen is worst it's going to happen is going to just donk off someone's head, and it's not going to cause them any injury. That'll be prosecutable, and they can again expect to be taken through the courts and potentially convicted.
Yeah, that's the pain in the arse with it all. So, look, while we're bringing this to a close, and again, I think we're going to get loads of questions, I think, and we'll probably do this again. You can find
happy to answer it.
Robert, and I'll put his I'll put the Twitter accounts up the top, and it's worth following just in case you ever need the number.
Yeah.
So I would say that the takeaways from this for now, and we'll probably look at maybe moving in deeper, maybe get Mel on, and we could revisit a few, anonymous cases as such, and talk about stuff what you've won and you've got off with. Maybe we could look at doing a larger bit with this. But our takeaways from this would be: if you're ever arrested at football, always get legal advice. You can always get rid of it afterwards, but always get legal advice.
Yeah,
it's free at the police station.
Yeah,
and you can get legal aid for the court cases, or you can get a reduced fee, like a set fee as such.
Yeah,
you can look at that.
Exactly.
Don't take pyrotechnics into football stadiums.
Yeah,
and don't take drugs into football stadium, because if you're caught with them outside, you have a higher tolerance potentially of barrier, unless it's football. You've got a ticket on you. But within football, anything from 0.1 gram or above potentially will get you a criminal conviction, will get you arrested, and will get you a football banning order.
Yeah, exactly.
If you get a football banning order, you won't be able to travel normally it's normally 2 weeks either side of a game, isn't it? I think it
Yeah.
is. So if, for instance, if England are playing next Tuesday, your passport would have been handed in 2 weeks ago. So, you know, if it's next Tuesday, it would have been handed in last week and then 2 weeks afterwards, so that you have no way of going.
Game, I think if it's just a single game, I think it's a shorter period of time. But if it's a competition, it's definitely about 2 weeks. That's definitely right. But I think I might be wrong, but I think the notification period where you've got to surrender your passport, I believe is shorter if it's just one. Yeah.
But if it's a tournament, it will be the whole tournament, regardless if England go out on day one or they go out in the final.
That's right.
That also represents women's football too.
Yes.
So if the women's game are played different years to the men, pretty much they can really cause you a pain to travel every year.
Yeah.
And the women's only come in recently. So, and the other takeaway is you think you're getting likes and being popular on social media for sharing, you know, football clips of disorder, showing the pitch or, you know, showing stewards getting involved. Okay, you know, it is what it is. That normally helps other people. But showing disorder, showing fights, showing, you know, this sort of stuff, what you're doing is the police's job. Most people now have iPhones 15, 16s or Samsungs. You're pretty much recording in 4K, 8K quality images where you've pretty much done their job for them. And I suppose the final bit before we go, before I think laptop dies and everything else, now I'm all right. Facial recognition. Facial recognition, they say, is being tested at high-risk football games. Tottenham Spurs, Man City, Man United, Liverpool, Everton, etc., etc. Millwall, West Ham, if we ever had it. But they're using that as a caveat when actually they have, in London, I believe they've got 6 vans now, maybe more. And they can deploy them at any game they want. I'm led to believe. They don't need to give you no warnings. They don't need to do anything.
No.
And you can't avoid it.
They just have to put a big sign up saying facial recognition in operation. I, as I understand it, and I was having this conversation the other day with a police officer when I was in court, we were talking about facial recognition. And as I understand it, currently it has been trialled, but it doesn't have a necessarily wider application at every football game.
No.
Because they need a database of images of the people that they're looking for. So they can't just do a speculative search in a crowd of people for anyone that might be on, for example, a football ban or might be deemed to be a risk supporter.
Unless you've been arrested and they've got your image.
And if they're specifically looking for you, but you're right, but they don't have, this database doesn't exist yet. It might do. It may be that's something that's being worked on.
Because it is covered within the Football Spectators Act that there is a membership scheme which wasn't brought in through logistics and everything else. But if there was deemed enough outcry from Mr. Roberts, who believes that bringing drinking back into stadiums will increase racism and also bringing safe standing back into football will increase racism, you sort of understand what you're up against when he is the man. Well, he isn't the man no more, I don't think, is he? I think it's it's a woman now. But he was an absolute nightmare. But just quickly before we go, your final thing: who is the worst borough in the UK for football-related arrests? I'm going to go probably. What's that?
Newham, Tower Hamlets.
I don't West Ham. Yeah, I suppose because they've got a nightmare. But I mean, other one apart from the Met, my suggestion would probably be South Yorkshire.
Do you mean for the actual police, the police forces themselves?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, some are more progressive than others. West Midlands police have been quite progressive, and that's been great. They've trialed various different kind of ideas, which have been less all about the let's just treat them as as a problem. That's been good. Greater Manchester Police haven't been great in the past, but they look like they're kind of improving again with that. They're trialing certain things that are progressive. But yeah, I mean, it sometimes it can just depend on who's in charge and what their attitude is towards football fans.
The only police officer who I liked was when I was working within Millwall, like when I was found on the board, there was Chief Inspector Owen. I can't think of his surname now, but he used to be the Chief Inspector, and he basically overturned. There was we had to pick tickets up from service stations when we went to Leeds, and he basically overturned it and said, I don't think Millwall fans are the problem here. I think it's our own fans, and I think that if we don't treat you like animals, you won't behave like animals.
Exactly.
And I've overturned it and basically overturned that ban, and we can travel wherever we want now. So yeah, I think he was the only one who I've got a good result from over the years. But yeah, the rest of them.
It is that mindset of, rather than thinking these are all lumping everyone in together and saying, yeah, look, there are people who behave badly at football, but it's just tarnishing, all football fans with that same brush, particularly if they're from one particular club. And then as a result of that, the policy that you implement in policing for your particular police force is directed in that way, and it's, I don't think, helpful.
No, I agree.
As you described, to open a dialogue and be a lot more open-minded and think, look, these are just everyday people that just follow a particular team. They shouldn't all be lumped in and dealt with in that way, which is unfair.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, Robert, I'll leave the final word to you. Anything you want to say? Have we pretty much covered anything? And I am going to have you back because I think I'd like to do a show on the police arrest numbers.
Yeah.
Because I think that would be a good insight on why some of them get categorized in certain ones, because it is different would be one. And I think there'll be loads of questions on this. And I just think that it will be good coming up towards the World Cup of us looking at, ways to do what happens if you're in America and get arrested, what happens if you get stopped at the airport, what happens if, various different just specialized videos concentrating on one or 2 points. I think I would like to do maybe a mini series with you and Mel and put these out there and go from there. So yeah, any final words?
No, absolutely happy to. And thank you for having me on. And I just hope that this that it reaches as many people as possible, that as you say, those take homes from this is just, don't go into a police scenario for interview without having a solicitor with you, whether it's me or us or anyone else. Football fans are dealt with very differently by the police and the prosecution and the courts throughout that whole process. And you can, without even ever thinking that you were ever going to need to be in that situation where you need a solicitor, just make sure you do the sensible thing and get in touch, because so many people don't, and they very quickly regret it, and they'll come to me afterwards and say, look, I wish I'd known about you, or I wish I'd come to you sooner, and it's too late now. But yeah, it's just, as I say, it's very unfair and harsh towards football fans a lot of the time, and we do what we can to try and help.
No, that's it. We are pretty much on 90 minutes, which is absolute by sheer
I've been told
luck.
I can talk a bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're on 90 minutes. A football game is 90 minutes. So hopefully over these 90 minutes, you've learned some bits you didn't know, some bits you did know, and filled in a few blanks around. Make sure you do comment, make sure you do share, make sure you send it in all your WhatsApp groups, and make sure that you take a screenshot, because as you can see, Robert's details are at the top. They will be in the descriptions with the links and everything you need. And thank you very much, Robert, for giving up your time. He hasn't invoiced me for this. This isn't a recommendation. Yeah, this isn't a recommendation for his company. This is more of a get yourself a lawyer. It just so happens that Robert's firm and Mel's firm who Robert works with, is a specialist football law firm. That is all they specialise in, is football law. So yeah, there are obviously plenty out there. But thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Please give us some comments if you want us to cover anything else. That is it. 90 minutes. The full-time whistle has been blown, and we're off.